Hello and welcome to Take a Beat. My name is Tirza and I'm the digital pastor here at IES. And Take a Beat is an IES podcast where we invite you to take a little break, join us to talk about things that matter, only to launch ourselves back on the beat. So today,
Oh, I thought this was called Take a Beating, and
No,
I was going to
no,
come
no.
down here and somebody would beat me. I feel so much better. Okay, go ahead.
no, we'll have Andreas for that. To
We'll give
take
him
the
a beating.
Poor guy, he's not even in the room.
You know, there are periods of history where the children of royalty had children their same age, and when the children of the royalty deserved a spanking, the servants' kids were spanked in their place.
How does in terms of like reward, punishment, and like all of that, how does that even work?
Well, that's how you have discipline, but you don't hurt the royalties. So
Okay.
And does anybody wonder why the royals are so messed up?
So, hi, Pastor Dave.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Sorry
much.
to rudely interrupt, but
No,
I
that's
thought this
fine.
is-
Actually, that
I want to
that's
welcome
great.
all who are here for getting a beating. Just, thrilled.
So, a few weeks ago, we had live Q&A, which is always a highlight at IES. And I wanted to talk about, well, in this episode and in the next episode, to talk about a couple of topics that came up and just
Okay.
I wanted to, chat about it because with live Q&A, you address a question and then you move on. But in one of the services, I think it was the first one,
Saturday night.
yeah, there were a lot of questions about adultery.
Right.
And very specific. It's not even like just like in theory, but a lot of like, oh,
Very specific.
yeah. And so was that surprising to you?
No. In fact, it's probably surprising to me that there aren't more. And what happens is because we use the Slido app, and so when people see a certain questions, and those are things that people care about or they're thinking about, then they will respond. So for anybody who's never watched IES, we do the Slido, we do it all live, and every service. So I do 3 services, and everyone has very different questions. And so that also kind of, some of the same things get up there, and then different people respond in different ways. And I'm not surprised there are questions about that, but the form of the questions was a little bit unusual.
How so?
Usually there's questions about talking about somebody who's committing adultery and what's going to happen to them, how do we help them, what do we say, or about the victims. A number of those questions were actually, I'm married and I love my spouse, but I'm also wanting to be involved with other people and, those kind of questions.
Sort of like contemplating intent too.
Yeah, and they were, they were very front. The first one that I remember, and I'm not quoting these exactly. If you want to know what they all were, go back and watch the video. But what I remember is somebody saying is, I have a spouse and I love my spouse, but I also have other people that I care for, and I want to be able to be intimate with all of them. How do I deal with this? And so that's kind of another angle.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to commit adultery. I'm thinking about committing adultery, or I am committing adultery. And what do you think about that, Pastor Dave? And so that's kind of the question that we had there, And so I was a little bit, badly behaved because we had somebody else who, one was a lady no longer wanted to be married, no longer wanted to be sexually active with her husband, and one was a man who wanted to love different women. I said, you guys could just meet up, and I was just kidding. I mean, obviously it's dangerous to be humorous, but it just really showed that a lot of people have bought into the world's dialogue that sex is just another physical thing that has nothing to do with spirituality or anything else like that. It's just if you're hungry, you eat. If you're sleepy, you sleep. And if you're having sexual desire, you just satisfy that. And that's a pretty modern idea that's circulated, but it's also exactly what was going on during the period of time the church was written.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Human beings don't change that much.
And that's so funny because I just had soap earlier today, and we're doing Philippians 3.
Yeah.
And that phrase, their God is their stomach.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's okay, if I'm hungry, I'll eat whatever makes me happy.
Right, right.
Is what. And so let's talk about this whole idea of like this topic of adultery. Well, I know once upon a time you did a sermon on it, but what is wrong about
Yeah.
adultery?
So this is what we want to go back and talk about. First of all, this particular question wasn't even really about adultery, because when you talk about adultery, it sort of defines the idea that having sex outside of your marriage is wrong. And these weren't people that were asking about that. They were just kind of people who were saying, I really believe I should be able to do whatever I want. And that's the issue. The issue when you talk about this, you've always got to go back to this one thing. Who invented sex and why? And the reality is that God invented it. It has a purpose, just like everything in creation has a purpose. And God's purposes are good. And when we trust Him, He helps us to find the right way to go through life by, telling us, you don't do this, don't do this, because in the end, it's best for you. And that's why we have rules, because sex is like enormously powerful, motivating, and all these different kinds of things. And by the same token, there's a framework that God gives us, and we have to understand it's not that God's old-fashioned,
Yeah.
and it's not that He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand.
He created
Actually,
it.
He created it, and He's the one who knows. And so that's kind of where it goes with that.
That's what, when you were saying that, that's ridiculous for me, for humans to think that, oh, God is old fashioned, or that God doesn't understand. How is it that He can't understand what He created?
Yeah.
In the
You
first
realize how
place?
stupid that sounds when you really think about it. But there are
That's
actually
right.
people who feel that way.
Yeah.
And so, this is my unique personality, and I'm different from everybody else. I have to be me. I know you're not so unique. There's 8 billion people out there, and you may have different fingerprints, and you may have different DNA, but your minds work pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of the thing on that.
And I think also, like, when we talk about that whole, it's sort of like not asking, but wanting the license to be able to do whatever I want.
Right.
And for me, when I think about that, and as you were explaining in my head, I was like, that means for us, when we think about it in that way, then God's not God, we're God.
Right.
We're treating ourselves like we're the ones who
Right.
get to do whatever.
Or God's rules count for everybody but me, because I'm special.
The exception to
Yeah.
the rule.
And so that's kind of the thing here. And actually, what you're dealing with is it's not just about sex.
Yeah.
There will be people who will argue it's okay to lie. And sometimes it just blows my mind. I talk to people and they'll say, "So, well, what should I say if somebody says that's like this?" And I'll say, "Well, you can't lie. You just have to tell the truth." And they're like, "What? What?" I've had people ask me, "Oh, when we talk to our Father, we always tell Him lies because, I don't know, that's okay, right?" No. Taking things that don't belong to you, being unkind to other people, lying, those are all wrong. And people just begin to believe that they can just do whatever they want. And that is, in fact, the definition of being human.
Yeah.
When we talk about original sin, that doesn't mean that because Adam took a durian fruit from his wife and ate on it, or whatever fruit it was, that now because of that one chomp that he made, we're all stuck somehow, through our DNA, through our bloodstream is this, sneaky thing. No. It's just this. That's what it means to be human, is that we're going to get tempted, and many of the times we'll submit to temptation.
Yeah.
And so that's, it's not just that only area, but it is definitely in that area too.
So, what was your answer, or for the, other than telling them to
up.
humorously to
Yeah.
meet up, but what's your response to these questions where people are?
Well, I always just tell people, look, God invented sex for something that is uniquely to a man and a woman who are married to each other. And regardless of how complicated or whatever it might be in that relationship, it is the most powerful motivator for that relationship to work. And within that relationship, within that sexuality within a relationship, two people, you can't get any closer than that.
Yeah.
Not just emotion, not just physically, but and when you take it outside, you use it outside of that for any purpose at all, you're losing. You're losing one of the things that God gave you, and you may think that you're better off by having a broad base of shallow experiences over one profound relationship. But you're not. God didn't create you for that. And it's really funny because you meet the most people with the most sort of libertine ideas about marriage and open marriage and da 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 da, da. And then they get cheated on and they're really ticked off. And it's like, you don't even believe in that, and
Yeah.
you're upset. And that's basically the issue.
So one of the things that we know is like our existence, it's not about just physical things or
Right.
connection, but we also like it our faith has a tremendous impact on who we are. And so what's the impact of this, I guess, disregard for what God has and like planned for sex to our spiritual walk or faith?
Well, it's overwhelming because one of the most interesting things in the Old Testament is this idea of idolatry, and that people always wanted to worship whatever gods would give them what they wanted, and they don't want to be faithful to God because they preferred something that was easier to, like when you have a little idol, you can stick it in your backpack and take it with you.
Yeah.
When you worship the true God, He's in control, not you.
Yeah.
And that whole idea of being able to control God and get whatever you want when you want it. And so you see in this Old Testament is this idea of idolatry, and adultery is linked to idolatry.
Yeah.
So you have this relationship with God that's supposed to be this primary relationship, and then you have this other relationship. And if you're not going to be true in this one, you're not going to be true in that one, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? The clearest example of this is, not the clearest, but one of the clear ones, Samson. Right? So Samson is a guy who's supposed to be faithful to God, and he's also supposed to be faithful to women, but whatever woman he falls for, how stupid does he have to be? Oh, yeah, if you braid my hair, then I'll lose my strength. And he falls asleep, he wakes up, his hair's braided, and he kills all these people. And he doesn't say, wait a minute, why did she tell him? It's just,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's the whole idea. You're not going to be able to have a successful relationship with God if you can't be trusted to be faithful to another human. And so that's basically what it's all about. Now I know life is complicated, and I know people do stupid things and people make mistakes, and I'm not what would you say? I'm not a kind of person who just thinks that a person makes one mistake and their life is over or things like that. We live in a world where the world says that things just don't matter. And we're people who say things do matter.
Yeah.
So our faithfulness to God matters. Our faithfulness to our spouse matters. Our faithfulness to our children matters. There's an interesting line in the Bible, and it's in there, I promise. And one of the things it talks about is sexual sin is different because it's a way that you sin against your own body. That's not saying it's worse necessarily, but it's just saying it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be like, God's telling you, like, don't drink poison, and you're going to drink it anyway. And that's different because of that. And, we talk about how there's supposed to be this great level of intimacy, like this glue that makes a couple, cling to each other. And then I'll have a guy tell me, that's ridiculous, Pastor Dave. I've had sex with dozens of women. It doesn't mean anything. And I'll say, yeah, proves my point. It doesn't mean anything.
Because it's supposed to mean something.
It's supposed to mean something. That's it. And that's what they sacrifice in order to achieve
what they want.
Selfishly want. Yeah.
And it's also very interesting when we see a lot of the prophetic books in the Bible, the analogy that's given about idolatry is always adultery.
Yeah.
Like the book of Hosea, my goodness.
Yeah. Right. That's the clearest example of it all. Yeah. The prostitute was a symbol of Israel's unfaithfulness to God. Yeah. Wow.
So, PD, there are some people who are having this discussion, and they're like, okay, um, like the line is sex. So if I don't have sex with someone outside of my marriage, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But then there's I mean,
Yeah,
you
that's
can,
not true at all.
yeah. So what constitutes
Yeah.
as adultery?
Well, and let's even go further than that. What constitutes as unfaithfulness? You know, man, one of the things that really just drives me nuts, and I've actually said something to a few women. You know, to hear you talk about your husband, why would you ever want to talk so badly about him? What do you gain from that? And sometimes, you know, I want part of our job as being pastors is to be with people in some of the worst days of their life.
Yeah.
And I've heard both men and women just brokenhearted at the loss of their spouse. And the first thing that pops into my mind, which I don't say, is, why didn't you ever say that when they were alive? You know, like, oh, my husband, he meant so much to me, and I'm thinking, man, I never heard you say that to his face. You know, it was always this, that, or the other, and both ways.
Yeah.
Both ways. And so, you know, we're talking about we're talking about honesty, we're talking about commitment, we're talking about being dependable, we're talking about, you know, having that kind of relationship where, like it says in Scripture, you put the other person first. And that's what it's all about. Now, of course, sexual immorality is like the ultimate betrayal of that.
Yeah.
But even that is, I mean, that's so ultimate that Jesus said, yeah, if there's sexual unfaithfulness in a marriage, then the marriage is more or less over,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't mean it has to be over. It just means it, you know. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we don't get into a place where we're kind of saying, well, you know, it's wrong to lie to your spouse, or it's wrong to cheat your spouse, or it's wrong to, you know, and this is like the biggest wrong of all. Sort of. Maybe the consequences are more dramatic. But lying, cheating, belittling, lacking to forgive your spouse, number one, those are all extraordinarily wrong. The consequences are different, but the act itself. And number two, if you go down that path, you're going to get to the other one pretty soon.
Yeah.
You know, you start lying to your spouse. What's wrong with the world? My husband looked at my phone. You know, there should be, for a husband and wife, there should be no secrets.
Yeah.
You know, unless like the secret is like, we're going to have a birthday party for you next week, you know, something like that,
Yes.
you know. It just doesn't make any sense. But it's what leads us to where we are for a lot of people. And honestly, Tirza, a lot of the people asking those questions, I think we're somewhat sincere. Like they're thinking, I think maybe this is okay
Yeah.
because it's no big deal. I had a man tell me one time, he said, I cheat on my wife all the time. And they were having marriage problems. And he said, but that has nothing to do with our marriage problems. And I said, it has everything to do with your marriage problems, you know. I said, well, she doesn't usually know, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
So, anyway.
So how about this, PD? I've also have it over the years. I think I've sat through a lot of your live Q&As, but there are some people who ask, okay, so my spouse isn't giving me like the emotional understanding. So I'm not sleeping with someone else, but I'm getting that emotional connection from someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you say about
You know what
that?
I would say? When you're seeking both an emotional connection, a physical connection, a trust connection, and the person you're supposed to get it from isn't getting it, that makes you have the incentive to be a better person to them. If you're going to find a substitute for that relationship somewhere else, then you're not going to work as hard at it, you know. Yeah. Now, one of the things that I'm fairly dogmatic about is I don't like this idea about like my spouse is my best friend. I think it's belittling. You know, like I have good friends, guys who are good friends. My wife Gigi is not my best friend. She's my wife. That's like comparing this to comparing this. It's way, way, way more important. But I know guys who have so much relationship with their buddies, and this is not anything to do with sexuality or anything. that they don't really have time for their wife anymore. They don't really, and if she doesn't pay attention to them, or if they don't really have a profound conversation with her, they don't care because they've got their guy friends. That's not good at all. That's not making her your best friend. That's making her your queen. And that's really the goal. And if you're hanging out with somebody else's queen, even if you're not doing anything wrong, then there's going to be a problem there. Yeah. Is it like people want to always classify sins? It's think of sin as more about direction, like you're going the wrong way.
Yeah.
God wants something better for you.
Yeah.
Don't think that it's true. God wants people that are married to be sexually faithful to each other. He also wants them to be faithful in every other way. And just because you're not breaking one law doesn't mean you're allowed to break the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what decision is going to make you become more like Jesus?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you can't, like you said, you can't say, I'm faithful in this way,
Yeah.
but just not in this way.
Yeah.
So, one last question, PD.
Okay.
So,
Too much coffee today. Mostly caffeine free, but
oh, really? So what, like for people who are struggling in their marriage, in their like wanting to make connections with other people who are not married to them, what advice would you tell them?
well, okay. Actually, I get this question a lot. First of all, if there's somebody else who's becoming to be important to you emotionally in your life, you need to stop that. You need to stop that because ultimately you're cheating somebody and you're stealing from somebody. So if the person you're feeling this emotional attachment to and everything else, you're married to somebody else, and so you're asking them to supply emotional support and everything else, and yet, number one, they may have a spouse.
Yeah.
So you're stealing that from their spouse. Or number two, they maybe not have a spouse, then you're offering them part of a deal. Because you have this sort of commitment, but you're still committed to your spouse, and so it's like, take it or leave it kind of thing. And that's not really the right way to. If you really care about that person, are you going to treat them that way?
No. Yeah.
And so and then you need to protect yourself and safeguard yourself in another context, in another setting completely, the setting of a bulletin board system that was supporting a particular athletic team that I was in this conversation with. So when people found out I was a pastor, a guy wrote to me and he said, "Hey, I just want to talk to you. This is all done on talk, back in the primitive days." And he said, I love my wife, but I found myself interested in somebody where I work. And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is stop spending time with that person.
Yeah.
The second thing you need to do is tell your wife, because your wife needs to know. And I said, if you can't tell your wife, I understand, then you have to quit your job because you have to be protected. And I said, your marriage is way more important than your job.
That's right.
And they wrote back and thanked me, and I'm not 100% sure what they did, but I just told them, there's ways you can make barriers there, and you just have to do it. If you don't, I heard a great story years and years ago. There was a guy named Jack Hayford, a great church on the way, and he had a rule that is in his pastoral staff, when anyone in his pastoral staff, and this is 30 years ago, so any guy on his pastoral staff, because they're all guys back then, unfortunately, which is weird because the denomination is founded by a woman, Amy Semple McPherson. But the rule was when any guy on the staff felt himself attracted to somebody, he had to tell one other guy. Like, he doesn't have to tell everybody, he doesn't have to do all this, but he needs to have at least one person on the staff that knows about it.
Wow.
Because that keeps you from like, oh, I'm going to go, somebody has asked me for coffee, or, all those kind of excuses that people
I
make.
need to go pray with someone.
Yeah. And so then, anyway, one of the guys on the staff ended up, destroying his marriage and having an affair and everything else. And somebody said to him, it's too bad that the guy decided to do this. And he said, no. He said, when he first was interested and he decided not to obey the rule and tell somebody, he had already decided what he was going to do. He may not do it for 2 years, but he had already decided what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. And we need to decide for ourselves, what kind of person are we? Are we the kind of person that is going to allow things to be in this twilight zone, gray zone? Are we going to be people who are faithful? And that's it. That's a decision we have to make.
And I think that emphasizes the fact that it is intentional. No one just kind of accidentally
Falls off a cliff, yeah.
Yeah.
That actually does weirdly happen, but it's pretty unusual, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is I think there are probably a lot of people in the church, some of them that may have asked that question, who really don't realize it's that big of a deal. And so they need to think about it and think, okay, well, God did set this up, and this is his rule.
Yeah.
Why is he making this rule? What is he trying to protect me from?
Yeah. That's a good
yeah.
way of reflecting on it.
I think people need to take marriage more seriously. Weddings, everybody takes weddings seriously. All kinds of big, everything else. Marriage, not so much. That's too bad.
All right. Well, thank you so much, PD. Thank you so much for joining us. And if this is your chance to just take a beat, not a beating, and ask about why this matters, and start thinking about why this matters. And if there are things that we all need to change in how we pursue life and pursue God, then let this be your chance. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week on another episode of Take a Beat, Don't Miss a Beat.